Hello crafty friends, welcome to today's Stamping September video. Today I am going to do some stamping using Distress Oxide hybrid dye / pigment inks and Catherine Pooler dye inks and put them head to head to see which kind of ink is best for this stamping technique. So I've got Abandoned Coral and Dried Marigold and Do-Si-Do and Bellini, so they're similar colours. But as I say, this one's dye and pigment and this one's just dye. I've got some water in a spray bottle and I've got 2 pieces of mixed media paper here. I'm using mixed media paper because I'm going to be using water. Mixed media paper is a very robust paper designed to take lots of water, lots of wet media, so it's great for this technique. For my main stamp today, I've got this photopolymer blob stamp. And I'll just put some dried marigold on there and then take a little bit of abandoned coral and dab some to one side. And then I'll give it a spritz with water to help the ink move a bit and stamp it on my mixed media paper to the right hand side. And now I've got a nice wet smushy blob with 2 colours that are blending nicely. I'm going to wipe that off and then do exactly the same thing again and create a row of blobs, watercolour-y blobs down the right hand side of my piece of paper. So that's the Distress Oxide. I'm going to leave that to dry naturally. And now for the Catherine Pooler inks, I'll add Bellini first and then get a bit of Do-Si-Do and add that to one side. Add a spritz of water and then press down. So there's the Distress Oxide one, there's the Catherine Pooler. I'm going to leave them to dry naturally and then come back to you in a bit. These are nice and dry now. I did give both of them a short blast with the hairdryer just to make sure they were completely dry. And the difference between the two is clear, I think. These are more solid, opaque blobs, which is what you'd expect because these contain pigment inks and pigment inks tend to be opaque, and these are more translucent and softer, and that's what you'd expect with dye inks because they tend to be translucent. But both are pretty in their own way. Now I've got this silicone stamp and I'm going to use the redder colour, the more red colour, redder colour. I'm not very good at the words today. And stamp this down as a way of kind of linking the top and the bottom. And now I'll use Do-Si-Do on this one. I've got another silicone stamp here. These are some grungy lines and I'm going to stamp that in the orange colour. So dried marigold. Now the Bellini. Now what I'm going to do is move this up about 1/2 centimetre and over about 1/2 centimetre. We're going to dust this with corn flour to make sure the ink is all dry, because I want to do some heat embossing in gold. So I'm going to ink up this stamp with clear embossing ink. Now I'm just going to dribble over my gold embossing powder and heat them with my heat tool. I want to add some gold heat emboss spatters. So put a bit of PVA on my mat here. I'm going to add some water, mix that around, and masking off this side, I'm just going to spatter on some spatter. Now these have set and cooled, I'm going to use my rectangle panel die to cut out a rectangle panel, funnily enough. So I've got my panels mounted on my cards, and I've got some black cardstock here and this branch die that I'm going to cut my focal image from. But before I cut, I'm going to put some very thin double-sided adhesive foam onto the back. So this was a bit fiddly coming out of the die. Some of the top layer of cardstock actually came off. I'm going to use some matte gel medium to stick it back where it should be. So that is now in place on there, looking good. For my sentiments, I've got some new stamps here. I had a little bit of a splurge on some new sentiment stamps. This is from Clearly Besotted Miniature Type, it's called. And I think I'm going to use the I'm Here For You. And I've got another piece of mixed media paper here, which I'm going to use so that it matches the paper on the card already. I'll stamp this in Memento Tuxedo black ink, and we'll see how it goes straight out of the packet. Perfect. Right, and another one for the other card. So I die cut the sentiments out with a stitched rectangle die. So we've got stitching around the sentiment and stitching around the edge of the panel. And I've also cut some little squares from a bit of leftover black card with the foam on the back. And I'm going to put them at either end of my sentiment to act as little struts to hold my sentiment up, because I want it to cross over the branch. So there you have two cards made using exactly the same techniques, tools and supplies, except for this one I used Distress Oxides, and for this one I used Catherine Pooler dye inks. So which one do you prefer? Do you prefer the bolder one or the more pastel one? I think I'm leaning towards this one, because I think those bolder colours in the background help the gold and the black to really pop. Right, I think that'll do for today. Thank you for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope it's given you a little bit of an insight into the differences between hybrid pigment dye inks and dye inks. And maybe it's given you an idea or two of something you can do with the supplies and tools that you already have in your stash. Right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you very soon. Bye for now.